look at some of the similarities of the towns here, what worked, what didn't work, and what might work for us in the boundary to grow economically, but also still keep in mind heritage and not lose who we are, but grow with the next generation that are raising their children here too. So first, before we kick off the first guest speaker, we're going to have our mayor come up, because he had a song he wanted to sing. So if you want to use this, you don't need
I got a strong one.
Okay.
Well, my role here today is to welcome our visitors from Revelstoke. I asked them how long it took to get him out of town, just so we will know next time for our own business. So they should give me a number, and I'll be looking at that number. But it's great to have them here. You know what? I'm a type of person that doesn't like to rebuild a wheel, and I think we can learn from other communities that have maybe gone through maybe similar things that we have. And so today they're going to share ideas, good, bad, and the ugly, I understand, of what they went through in Revelstoke. And hopefully we can take the bits that fit to our needs and be able to, through the chamber and Community Futures and others, be able to put this into some practice. So I'm very happy to have you here. You came on a beautiful day. You know, we have beautiful rivers going, rushing through and by, and that's where they belong, rushing through and by. So I'm going to be cutting in and out, but I just wanted to express my gratitude. I know the previous mayor is also present here from Revelstoke, so and you have a good mayor this time. Not that it wasn't the last time, but him and I have something in common, I understand. So,
Yeah, we're dead.
Well, we gotta dig a hole, okay? I'm sorry.
Your body's scary.
Yes, we do. We certainly do. Anyway, absolutely looking forward to your conversation today, and I want to thank Sean for even thinking of this idea and this great idea. So, well done, Linda. Welcome.
Our first speaker is Ingrid Braun, who is the Economic Development Officer of Revelstoke currently, and she's going to come and have a chat about what's going on there right now and what works and what didn't. Ready to roll?
Yes.
All right. It's all you.
Let me know if you can't hear me, and I'll pick up the microphone, but I prefer just to talk. And certainly ask questions. Raise your hands. Tell me to slow down, to speed up, to go away, whatever you need to let me know. So I came from Ontario originally. I taught for 7 years in the urban planning program at Queen's University, but I always preferred to look at economic development as a career field. You get to say yes more often. Planners usually say no. So, that's a good tension to have in most communities, is finding ways to work with your zoning bylaws and planning regulations, but to think outside the box and look for ways to grow your economy. I worked in Smith Falls previously. Our big claim to fame was the Hershey's Chocolate Factory, which was converted into a huge cannabis company, and Heritage Canal, which was welcomed these luxury houseboats from Europe to ply its waters, and it really transformed the community. What could go wrong? Cannabis and a big houseboat that's self-driven. So Revelstoke, my role in Revelstoke is really the sweet spot. It's a really exciting role, and I'm, after almost 5 years, still happy to be here, happy that this guy helped to hire me. Our main three pillars of economic development, I would say, there's the core traditional industries, which of course are forestry, hydro, and CP rail transportation. And those have really built the town. The history of the town, the legacy, the families that were brought from Italy, the people that came to build the dam, that has paid for and built the backbone of the community. And that's changing, as we know. The resource sector is changing, experiencing challenges. Population is changing, skilled trades are becoming harder to find. And the two areas that are really growing in our community are tourism and just the whole recreation sector, which I understand is a big draw for people coming to Grand Forks. I can tell just driving in here that it seems to be a real magnet for outdoor enthusiasts with this climate. So we're very fortunate in Revelstoke to have support funding related to that function. We do collect NRDC taxes, as I understand your region does, and we are a resort community. So that being said, that infusion of capital has helped to mitigate some of the negative effects of the tourism growth. When you have this flood of people coming into the community to ski and they're not paying property taxes, and they're not educating their children there, they're not investing in the community long term, yet they are still utilizing the infrastructure in the community. So some of the resources we have access to through the province enable us to build amenities like skateboard parks or splash parks, to build recreation trails, to do things that benefit the residents as well as visitors. So that's a really important concept, I would say, in economic development, is look for those opportunities to leverage investments in amenities that will cater to visitors, but will actually improve the quality of life for residents. So outdoor recreation, of course, is a sector on its own, separate from tourism, because that's really what draws people to live here and to move to your community, because they want to raise their children here, they want to access the outdoors, they want to open a business, pursue a career in that sector. So those two things fit really, really well together. One feeds the other, and you can leverage resources from both of those areas. So I thought I would just talk a little bit about economic development from the perspective of who, what, when, where, why, and then really, really the key piece is how you grow a community, how you diversify an economy. So starting with who, and it's pretty entwined with the why, because again, who do you want to come to your community? And I understand that there's a lot of appeal for this community for lots of reasons. Affordability is one. You have retirees coming here because of the climate, and again, affordability. You probably are looking for young families to come here to boost your population longer term. You're looking perhaps for those digital nomads or remote workers. That's been huge in Revelstoke over the last few years, post-pandemic, as people are, packing up and leaving their homes in Toronto and Vancouver, and they can actually afford homes in the interior, do quite well, educate their kids, have access to the outdoors, and continue to, work on their careers remotely. So that's a big asset, is if you can look at that opportunity to brand your community for remote workers. So I was asking lots of questions over lunchtime. Do you have high-speed internet? Sounds like you've got that already kind of locked down. So that's a huge, huge draw for those kind of remote tech workers who come with their resources and with their jobs. They don't require bricks and mortar places of employment. They might be looking for co-work space. They might be looking for the cool coffee shop so they can set up their laptop and, for $5 cup of coffee, spend 8 hours in your coffee shop. So that creates that kind of buzz and vibe in your downtown core, and that kind of thing seems to multiply. You see a couple of cool cafes or coffee shops with people working there, and you think, oh, I could do that. I could see myself living in this beautiful place and working. So remote workers, retirees, affordability, young families, that's the resident attraction piece of it. I don't know how your visitor economy is. How would you say, and I'm going to ask you guys some questions too, how important is tourism to the economy of Grand Forks so far?
I would say very important.
Yeah. Is it growing relative to the resource sector? You see more visitors over time, or is it kind of a
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, go
I
ahead.
would say yes, it has.
Yeah.
Over the last since COVID, tourism-related numbers coming out of the Visitor Information Center have shown an increase.
That's great. Yeah, we're seeing the same thing in Revelstoke. One thing that's interesting to note in Revelstoke, while we're seeing increasing numbers through the Visitor Information Center, we're also seeing it not growing as quickly as it was prior to the pandemic, and I think that's because more people are a bit wary of going into the Visitor Information Center. They're getting all their information on their phone.
Yeah.
So we've shifted a little bit in our attraction efforts and making sure that visitors know what amenities and opportunities we have in town by putting some of our visitor services to mobile visitor services. So we actually have a van with great graphics on it, and it drives around town and goes to the key destinations like the resort, like Parks Canada, the downtown plaza when there's live music on, and they basically find visitors where they are and encourage them to stay for longer than maybe they plan to stay. So visitor services is really key, and how you are willing to, adopt as people's interests and motivations change. Everybody's on their phones. They want to be able to access the information digitally, and you may not see them actually walking into the visitor center. So if you're seeing a huge increase in the visitor center, that means it's probably even a bigger growth impact of digital access to information. So So if you work with Destination BC in your tourism branch, you'll have an idea of what kind of visitors you're attracting here. We know, for instance, Revelstoke, it's young adults and it's young families, and they're there for the skiing, they're there for the outdoor recreation, they're there for the sledding. So knowing who your visitor is, who's interested in coming here, and again, why, is really key to kind of shaping your economy to answer those demands. Any questions at all so far? Oh yeah, please, just jump in anytime.
Yeah, I missed what you said. You said they come for the skiing, and then I missed the word.
They come for the skiing, they come for the sledding, they come for the live music, they come for the arts and culture. They really do go hand in hand. I think the outdoor recreation economy is what brings people to town, but it's the arts and culture that keeps them there and makes them want to move there, because it creates this buzz in town. You get this density of creativity, whether it's the physical assets like gem theater, cafes, places where people gather, but also the density of human capital. You've got these people that are very creative, creatively minded, like Sean here, and you want to build that kind of culture around music and performance, drama, comedy, and I understand Sean does it all. Having seen him in a performance of Shrek in Revelstoke. There are other questions, please. Yeah.
Just curious, your business is in Revelstoke. Which social media or platform, online platform, do they use to advertise? Here it's Facebook.
It's Facebook.
And I heard a quote on Ted Lasso last night, Facebook is for the old or the racist.
Part of what you're saying isn't wrong, because just yesterday I was sitting in a meeting with the board of Tourism Revelstoke, and they were saying Twitter is growing exponentially, and we can't even use Twitter as a municipality. It's government's not going to use Twitter anymore. Instagram is still growing. Facebook is stagnating, and I think it probably is because the main user group is older. But it's still a huge platform for the city. But it seems like Instagram, and Twitter, of course, are growing. I mean, somebody in our tourism office, one of the young women who have these amazing ideas and skills, put out some funny story about Revelstoke, and it had something like 2 million views on TikTok. So yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
You were mentioning attracting young families, which I think for Grand Forks is vitally needed to get everything going and changes, new ideas. One of the challenges that I know personally with young families coming is the hospital doesn't have a birthing center. So does Revelstoke have a hospital there that young families can have their children in Revelstoke? And if not, then any ideas on how we can get younger families here knowing that there's not a place for them to deliver their children?
Revelstoke unfortunately has that service in house, so we're set up with that. But I think one thing that we found that we were able to increase our healthcare services by collecting data that showed that our larger population, including that shadow population of workers that come and go at different seasons, actually put our population closer to 15,000 than 8,000. So I'll just say a little bit, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, how did you collect that data?
Okay, so TELUS Insights. It had started before I got to town. I was there just to reap the rewards. But basically what they looked at was every cell tower in Revelstoke is a TELUS tower, and they were able to capture every cell phone that comes into town. And so we looked at the data and we divided it up by tenure of stay. So whether they're there for 1 hour, 3 hours, maybe they were buying gas, buying some food, probably flushing their toilet, 5 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours. So we could get a bit of a sense of the economic impact of those visitors. But the real data was in a moving window. We defined a resident as somebody who's been there for a moving window of 8 weeks. So not necessarily captured by the census, but not there as a visitor. They're there as a second homeowner, they're there working, and that population peaks in the winter about 15,000 people, and in the summer about 13,000 people. So those are people that are there for at least 2 months. So they're not your typical visitor. They're a shuttle. They're the part of that shuttle population, and those are remote workers. And based on that data, although it's hard to leverage that in the municipal world to get more funding for core services, we were able to use that data for interior health to actually add 3 family doctors and a whole other level of service to the local hospitals. So it was expensive data. I think there's other models out there probably now. We were one of the first communities to get on board with data. Was there a question up there? Yeah.
Just can you speak quickly to the resort municipality process? You're a designated resort municipality in the province. What type of taxation do you generate and benefit from out of that?
Okay,
yeah.
So there's 2 sources of taxation being a resort municipality. One is the MRDT, which is 68 or 70 communities in BC that collect that. And that is specifically collected from accommodation taxes, so taxes on hotels, motels, Airbnbs, that kind of thing. And that goes into tourism marketing specifically. I'll come back to this in a second, because we're actually changing how we do that. The other source of revenue is as a municipal resort. We are one of 15 communities, including Wandsworth, Tofino, Whistler, Newfoot, that are able to access that. It's a large pool that they divvy up by some kind of secretive formula. I'm not quite exactly sure how, but we get a portion of that funding, and it can be used for infrastructure. So that's where we can enhance those kind of civic amenities. Like,
what is the budget for that?
The budget for that right now, I think we are getting about $840,000 a year. Whistler would get millions.
Yeah.
Other smaller towns, okay. It could be 300,000. Some of the resort municipalities include places like Harris Potter, so there's a real range of size of communities.
But it's based on revenue that's collected at the hotel.
No, not well, kind of. I mean, it's I think the amount we get is based on the performance as measured by the MRDT tax from hotels. So it's not derived from that source. It's gas tax and other things like that. So does that answer your question?
How long have you been at this resort municipality?
Mark would be answer that better. 2010, 12? Yeah. 2008, right, when the resort opened.
Thank you.
Yeah. The MRDT tax is an interesting one because it is easier to access to become an MRDT community, and we have seen those levels go up quite dramatically. So when I started 4.5 years ago, MRDT tax revenue was about $600,000 a year. Now we're looking at probably $1.8 million a year. So it's a huge change, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's not only new hotels going up, the costs are going up, prices of the rooms are going up. We've also just recently increased our collection area to include the whole region, and we've got up to 3%, which the majority of towns collecting that tax is already at. What is interesting, though, is there is frankly, a backlash in the community against tourism to some degree. The pandemic made it worse, but people are, concerned about some of the changes that come with becoming a growing tourism economy, a growing tourism town, and so we have to do some work on mitigating those negative impacts and changing the conversation around, what are the clear benefits of tourism to the local economy, and how it enables us to have things like skate parks and dog parks and walking trails, courtesy of that revenue flow. One of the changes we're doing is shifting towards not strictly destination marketing, but destination management. So that's where there will be more impact or effort put into resident empowerment and making sure that we're building a community that people are proud to, host visitors. Yeah.
It was interesting you said that the community there was a bit of a backlash towards tourism. I'm assuming then that there would have been resistance to growth. And I know that is an issue for our community, that there are those who do not want to see the community grow because they moved here because it was a small community. So how do you counter that?
That's a tricky question. That's the age-old question, I think. I'm sure Mark and Gary will have some things to say about that. I think just again, it's easy to get on Facebook and complain about too many cars downtown and not enough places to park, and housing prices going through the roof. So I think it really needs to be incredibly proactive and talking about the benefits of tourism. So the fact that residents have access to these miles of networks of amazing high-quality trails. The fact that we have live music in our plaza 60 nights through the summer. So it's just, promoting and marketing those benefits that actually make a better quality of life for the residents. And so we do a lot of that. That's that shift in tourism marketing. It's really more about marketing how the quality of life has improved over the last several years. So
how do you convince the naysayers?
I don't think you can. I think it's hard to have them join that conversation. I think if they have young children or young adults, they might see that there's more opportunities in the future for the kids to come back to the community, and that's definitely something that's happening in Revelstoke. Kids come back. They come back to build a life, to build business, to have their families. So that goes a long ways, I think, towards changing that. We have to create those opportunities first for that next generation to return to work. So I talked a little bit about the who and the why. The what, I've just got a bit of a list of different kinds of things that I've seen Revelstoke do really, really well that I think are certainly relevant here. When you talk about what is the attraction, once you figure out who you're trying to attract and why are they moving here, are they coming here to visit and empty their wallets in the process. Arts and culture is huge. I can't say enough about this. The creative economy is extremely rich. It supports young families, it supports jobs. It is not going to replace the level of pay that you'll see in the resource extraction sector, but it creates a buzz and a vibe in town that people want to be close to. So people will move here if they see that there's lots of stuff happening. And that takes investment, and it's a tough call. It's tough for municipalities to invest funds directly into arts and culture, but the multiplier effect and the leveraging you get from that is really quite outstanding. It's something that markets certainly, when you see in Gary, how the economy can change. We've had examples in Revelstoke like our Luna Fest that started off very small, and last fall, I think in its 4th year, had 6,000 visitors spending the entire weekend in town, heads and beds on in the shoulder season, filling up every hotel room. So that's, you can't, it's hard to quantify that kind of impact. We have some new exciting innovation happening in the arts and culture scene. We have a group called ROAM, the Revelstoke Outdoor Arts Movement, and they're creating outdoor artworks and putting them on the ski hill. And so they are claiming to be, we'll have the claim of being one of the only ski resorts in North America that has art right on its hill itself, that you have to try and find it. And I think that will grow through the town, through the trail networks. It'll be known as a hub of, outdoor recreation, yes, but also there's really cool art in the woods, hidden in the trees and on the sidewalk. And I think that is going to, again, recognize that value of art and culture. We are doing more with First Nations, which is really exciting. There hasn't been historically a strong Indigenous presence in Revelstoke, but of course they were there all the time. 50% of the school population identifies as First Nations. And, we've been growing events around reconciliation, National Regional Indigenous Peoples Day. Last year, for the very first time in Revelstoke's modern history, a flotilla set forth from Revelstoke. We launched in Revelstoke. Sinaiaks, joined by Squamish and other First Nations groups. There were about 60 people, I believe, in huge dugout wooden canoes, and they canoed back down to Inchilea and the States. And that's the first time in hundreds of years they've done that. Usually they set sail from south of the Kiwi side down. So the fact that, there's that sense of place and that sense of interest in that culture. Last year it was fairly private kind of event. It was reclaiming their history. This year it's a tourism project. Europeans love this stuff. People are coming to watch this event take place. Also remembering to celebrate your history. Timber Days is still huge. The mining culture you have here. Finding ways to celebrate what that brought to the community, the skills it brought, the sense of community and activities and things you can build on that. The food and beverage sector, that's another area that of course works really well with tourism, but if you've got farm to table opportunities, you've got a market, it sounds like, you've got wine districts, distilleries, breweries, tourists love that. It provides really good jobs for entrepreneurs and young people. And then again, I just would come back to, I guess, your main asset as a tourism destination and as to attract those residents is, your outdoors, that recreation experience, that these landscape features. What is it about this community that people want to come and experience? The scenic features, the feature attractions, hot springs, landscape, mountain bike trails. You can't do enough to build out those resources and amenities that will attract people. Once the buzz is out there, that there's a great mountain bike system here of trails and a great cafe to stop in afterwards and some live music to see, people will come. They will come and they'll spread the word around with their peers and more will come. And then eventually you have so many coming that you're scrambling with trying to figure out how to put a porta potty out of the trailhead where there's suddenly 150 cars that weren't there last year. So it's a good problem to have. And you have to be ready for it, but it's certainly an opportunity to really put yourself on the map. Any other questions? I want to turn it over to the others. Yeah.
Well, my comment would be more than the museum. I get lots of visitors that come here interested by the Kumor culture.
Yeah.
There is nothing besides the museum that seems to celebrate that culture here, and it's the largest settlement outside the Caucasus of the Wars, and I feel that that's a bit
represented.
Yeah, not underrepresented, underexploited, because it's a lot of people come and they come to Grand Forks because they imagine that they're going to come and there's going to be tons of stuff about the Comores and there's nothing.
Is there opportunities to do some of that farm-to-table food events or farm tours or farm gate sales that would kind of open it up to people and visitors?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I work with Matthew at the museum. It's a beautiful setting for an outdoor event, farm to table, so we're actually exploring that right now.
I'm thinking of even places in Ontario where I'm from originally would have these Mennonite, markets and antique shows and fairs.
Are you from
I'm
Northeastern?
Ontario originally.
Is Northeastern Ontario?
Yeah, Southeastern Ontario. That's where I'm from. Yeah.
I'm from around North Bay.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you probably know it gets September. That's a huge draw if you want to go to Mennonite farmers markets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Do your farmers still do their white party, their outdoor table?
I'm hoping it's going to come back this year. It stopped during the pandemic.
Yeah.
They've got a restaurant now called Terra Firma right downtown Revelstoke. And so all of their food is directed from their farm.
Yeah.
And it's always full. So it's that's an example of that kind of farm to table thing that people will travel to get to, or when they're there and they stumble upon it, it's something that makes them quite excited. It kind of just improves the visitor experience and the visit. Yeah. Any other questions at all? Okay.
All right, thank you, Ingrid. And next is the retired Revelstoke Arts Council Executive Director. How many years? A lot.
10.
10 years. And this is Gary Pendergast.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Ingrid. That was really interesting. And of course, you did mention arts and culture a great deal in that. When I first landed in Revelstoke, I'm a retired principal, so I'd not actually done any arts and culture stuff at all, ever. I still remember in my interview, I was asked what arts and culture I did. And I had to say, well, I can play 4 chords on the guitar. And I'd done a bit of acting when I was at school, which had been a few years ago. In fact, I acted as a little girl because I went to an all-boys school, but I didn't tell them that. So my arts and culture background wasn't very large, but the job wasn't just about arts and culture. It was also about how you can actually attract it. In Revelstoke, there were 2 things that were going on, and Ingrid mentioned one of them. One of them was already there, it was running well. It was the Summer Street Fest, was just over 60 consecutive nights of live music for 3 hours a night. The city's part in that was very crucial because they actually funded it, all of it. So when I got there, I think the grant was 25 or 30,000. I can't remember, it was around that figure. And with that, my job was then to actually bring in 60 shows, and it was one person per show, for $30,000. Now, I concentrated a lot on local people because then there was no travel, there was no accommodation problems, because Revelstoke didn't have that much accommodation at the time. It did have a couple of hotels, it had motels, but not much. And not many of them were terribly keen on giving me discounts for the people that I was bringing in. So I tended to concentrate a lot on locals to begin with. What I did find it did is that those locals, because they played in other places, they would go to Salmon or Kelowna or Nelson or around, maybe Grand Falls, and play one show, and then they tell them about the shows they were going to do. Oh, I'm going to Revelstoke next. So if you like what you've heard, come along and hear me again. So my advertising was actually being done by the performers themselves. And in essence, the city was paying for it. So with that budget, I was able to extend it. I think my longest summer street fest was 65 nights. And it just depended on whether we started at a weekend or not. But 65 nights. By the time I finished in 2017, Street Fest was getting 65,000 from the city. And I'd already pulled in probably the same amount from various grants. Gaming, British Columbia Touring Council, BC Arts Council, National Heritage, federal. So there were a lot of things. They were paying, or they were giving me grants of $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, and I was able with that to begin to expand the whole process. So by the time I finished doing that, probably half of the people playing were from out of town. And in turn, they brought even more people with them. So the initial investment that the city had made actually was beginning to do, as you heard from Ingrid, bringing people to town. They were staying, and then because on the night they were staying, I made sure the cards went round showing who was playing 2 nights hence, 3 nights hence. Oh, well, why don't you stay on for a couple more nights and then you can hear that one. And it's 3 hours. Now, we're for 3 hours for free. We did not charge them a thing. There wasn't even a donation box. The only thing they had to actually pay, and I don't know, Sean, close your ears, because we played outside the Roxy, which is the cinema in Revelstoke. And so they opened their concession. So if anybody wanted to, they could wander in, get some popcorn, get some pop, and wander back out, sit down, listen to the music. And it cost them nothing if they lived locally, and obviously if they came in, it cost them their accommodation or whatever they were doing. There was that then, Street Fest. There was also the Mountain Arts Festival, which was run by volunteers, and it was over a weekend, and it was down in the park. But the volunteers that were running it were already running out of energy. And it was a decision the Arts Council made at the time that we would actually stop that, because it was beginning to get a little bit out of hand. And the problem that we often had in the arts and culture sector was that not everybody had heard of the people we were bringing in. And that, I found, was probably one of the biggest issues for me to begin with. As you can probably hear, I'm not actually from Canada. I've been here since 2005, but it's not converted my accent at all. And being a principal, I've not really looked at Canadian culture and who played the arts. I've heard of Gordon Lightfoot, obviously it's just passed, and several others from Canada. Most of the people I'd heard of I thought were American, but they were actually Canadian all the way through. And I discovered that when I got here. I thought, well, it's easy this, I'll just go out and I'll ask people what they want, who they would want to come. Brian Adams. Because Brian Adams went to Revelstoke once, before he was Brian Adams, really. You know, they didn't know who he was. And he went down to the park and a massive crowd. So I emailed him and said, look, you came then, how about dropping in? And he answered. Well, somebody answered, I don't think it was him. And he was flying over us at night, so obviously couldn't stop. So that was the last I heard from him. And Rod Stewart was going through Revelstoke in a motorcade at night. So he wasn't going to stop either, because I got in touch with him too. Because that was someone else people wanted. So I had to lower my sights considerably, way down in fact, and begin to look at accessible people. So who can I bring in who is likely to bring a show that a lot of people might like to see? And that's a very hard juggling act to do. I know Sean is playing that game at the moment, and it really is difficult because you're second guessing everyone. If you take 20 people from your town and you ask 20 different people who they'd like to see, you'd probably get 20 answers, which is hopeless. So I started to bring in some people based on the grants I could get, and I reasoned that what I needed were probably 6 full concerts a year. I had 3 shows before Christmas, 3 shows after, then I'd have the Summer Street Fest. And that's the way it began to work. We didn't have a theatre. I couldn't use the Roxy, mainly because the person who owned it wouldn't let me. He wanted a massive amount of money for me to just have one night. So we went to churches, schools, the Legion, and because we didn't have a home, that actually affected the number of people that came to these things. Some people, well, I'm not going to that school building, I had a terrible time in there. I mean, that's got nothing to do with my show, but anyway. So, slowly but surely we built that, 6 shows a year, which became 8. And meanwhile, we were beginning to go back to the city and say, what else can we do? You know, they're funding all of that. Well, what else can we do? How can we project the Revelstoke Arts Council, which at the time had all of the other museums under its umbrella? So we had a heritage museum in much the same way. We had a forestry museum, or we still have all these things, a forestry museum, heritage museum, forestry museum, railway museum, the art gallery, Revelstoke Visual Arts Centre, which my wife ran. So we had that too. We used to help them get grants, we would give them some money as well. But it was all about how do you attract the people? What else can you do? And we decided that probably one of the best ways to do it was if we could get a fixed place to do all our shows. And it happened at the same time the Ministry of Education were giving out neighbourhoods of learning grants. Now what a neighbourhood of learning grant is, there were 10 of them for the whole province, and they could be a childcare centre, they could be a theatre, they could be a library, they could be a variety of things that would enhance the education process. So we were very much part of that, and we said to the education service in Revelstoke, we would like a theatre. Now it happened at the same time, we were having a new high school built, new high school and elementary school built, and we were successful with the neighbourhoods of learning. So we got a theatre, a 275-seat theatre, built on the side of our high school. We had a home. That's when we began to really expand, because we could then say, we've got somewhere you can come to, it's ours, well it belongs to the school district, but it's sort of ours, and we can put on your show with professionalism and everything else that we couldn't do before. United Church, for instance, you had to lift all the pews out of the way to begin with, and a variety of things. I always felt terrible, actually, about moving all the altar things. I didn't like moving them out of the way, because you had to, they were there. And you had to move them out of the way for people to do their shows. So we had a theatre, and it meant that from that time on, it's improved. Now, you're already further on than we were. I mean, that theatre didn't arrive until at least halfway through my time in Revelstoke. You've got it somewhere, and it's a good somewhere. I mean, I know Sean would prefer you to have another 185 seats in an upper tier, because then you can really not charge a lot for a ticket and actually get really good people in. And that money that he gets in is distributed back out to your town, because it's spent by him and the group that I'm with. The Downstage Performing Arts Society, I'm the treasurer for. Although I don't actually live in Revelstoke anymore. I've left Revelstoke now. I'm in Parksville on Vancouver Island. But I still take part in our board meetings by Zoom type things. And my job for that is to actually get the grants I've talked about, to try and make sure that we bring enough money into Grand Forks so that you can have the shows that you want to see, so that you can attract people in who want to come along and then begin to say, as we heard in Revelstoke, oh, so they've got culture, they've got the arts. That's another thing we wanted to see, along with, as Ingrid was saying, the trails and all, in Revelstoke's case, skiing and all of those things. It was, by the way, the snow that meant I left Revelstoke. I'd shovelled for a long time. And in the end, so it was nothing else. I was enjoying Revelstoke otherwise, but the snow defeated me. I mean, in Parks, I'll just tell you a little story. In Parksville, the first time it snowed, with glee, I thought, well, I have all the equipment because I've moved it. I had all the Revelstoke equipment, the big stuff, in my shed. So the snow was there, it was on the drive, about that much. So I thought, oh, right. So I went, sorted through the shed, got my shovels and everything, went out, and it melted. Didn't happen to me in Revelstoke, ever. It wasn't that, it never was that, it was and onwards. So that's really why I'm down there now. I couldn't do it anymore. But I still enjoy going back to Revelstoke. I still enjoy, in the summer, going to the Street Fest. The Lunar project was right towards the end of my time, but I was very much part of how that was put together. And Lunar was all about performing arts. So there was the lot. There was physical art, there was performing art, there was dance, there was music, there was singing, there was everything you could imagine going on in multiple places around the town. And the city played a huge part in that, because I know, not just in terms of funding, but in terms of closing off streets, allowing all sorts of people to move around the town, to investigate the town. And we tried to push it out into the outskirts of the town, so it wasn't just about downtown, so that business owners further out actually had somebody visiting them too. So we really did push it out. And I mean, it was COVID that actually has quietened that right off, unfortunately, but I'm hoping that it will be resurrected back to the state that it was. 6,000 people.
Last year.
Last year.
Back.
It was back. 6,000 people last year. Astounding. Quite astounding. I mean, with Street Fest, we tried to count, it was like counting cats, because it was out in an intersection in the street, and people go out that way, that way, that way, or that way, and we just couldn't count, because people obviously would come, they wouldn't necessarily sit for all 3 hours. They'd come, they'd have their popcorn, they'd listen for a while, then they'd go off and someone else would come in and take their seat. But we usually would have 500-600 people there across the evening. And it wasn't always the same people. So we could see that it had its place, but it only started because of that money going in, and it was the catalyst for the whole thing. Sorry, have you got a question?
Yeah, Gary, what was the operating budget for the nonprofit?
Well, to begin with, another little story on that one. So I got the job, and they said, well, we've got a grant that pays you. And I mean, I just did a fixed fee thing, because I was retired, so and they said, that will pay you for 3 months. After that, you need a grant to pay yourself. So the operating budget in the first year was about $8,000. When I left, it was just over 300,000.
Yeah, and that included the museums and everybody
No,
else?
no, that was just the Arts Council.
Okay, Under the umbrella, though, you referenced the fact that you had.
Yeah, we did at the time, and I mean, they reported to us because we acted as the main arts council in the area. What happened after that is they broke away and became part of the Museums Association and became charities in their own rights. Because what the disadvantage to being under one umbrella is you can't apply for each element.
Right. So funded municipally, you said, was $60,000 when you left, and then the rest was grant opportunities to 300.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. So 300,000. Yes.
The logistics of the Street Fest, were you basically doing shutting down an intersection for 3 hours and then letting it be open again? I'm just curious how that went, because they've tried various aspects of shutting down the street here, and it hasn't really worked out in a lot of time. So I'm curious about your experience.
I mean, Mark might be able to tell me, because the development of Grizzly Plaza, where it's held, I don't know if that was an idea that came at the same time, or whether we simply utilised that space. It's the turn off to downtown. So it's the very last turn as you right into town. It's the very last turn. We would block that off. It's opposite a railway level crossing, which was one of the not so good things, because the trains as they come in, clang, 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 as the gates went down, and then the train would blow its whistle. And so some of the people that played had railway songs that they play at that time. But yes, so the city gave us barriers that we put across, and the traffic was simply routed round it. And we closed both ends. To my mind, it's a very good pedestrian area anyway, and it's often closed now because it can be fairly easily closed. I think it is a matter, again, of making sure that you take everybody into account. I mean, the stores that had their stores along the side weren't always tremendously happy. But what we did with that is we tried to make sure we advertised them as much as we could. You know, if you're sitting here while the performer is having a break, they had a couple of breaks in 3 hours, of course, go and have a stroll around the stores here. You know, you've got stores here if you want to have a look and maybe buy some things, and that improved over time. We didn't otherwise have anybody selling anything. You know, people wanted to do that, we didn't. Yeah.
Did you allow them to busk as well to supplement what you were paying them? I'm just curious.
Well, no, we didn't stop them, in fact. I mean, if they wanted to do that the following day, they might, but I don't remember too many people doing it. I mean, I know you had Andrew Allen here. Andrew Allen was one of my first people at the Street Fest, and I didn't pay him a lot. So I didn't pay many people very much. 300-400 was the average.
I'm just curious, when they were actually doing their performance at Street Fest, would you allow them to busk there, or?
But they could sell their
merchandise
CDs and things like that, and merchandise. Okay. Yes, we allowed them to do anything like that. And quite often, you know, they would make a certain amount of money from that to supplement. But usually they were off to somewhere else the following day, and that is where I think, in economic terms, you want to really see Grand Forks opening up, so that when people are playing somewhere, their next place for stopping is Grand Forks. You know, so they work the routes out. This is where I want to go next.
The circuit, yeah.
Once you get back on that route, it's good. Did you put your hand up? Sorry.
No, I was thinking Nelson Kelowna.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. And I mean, I've talked to Sean a lot because I've still got a lot of contacts in the arts and the executive directors in the various places. And I used to have conversations with so many people across the province about who they were having, why they were having them, how much they were costing. And there's a brilliant trade show that we'd like to get Sean to next year, where you actually can hear all these people and you can negotiate with them, rather than an agent who puts his 10% on. You can just talk to the artist, and often some of these people are just travelling on their own. They're in their car, or in their RV, and they just drive around for the summer, playing in as many places as they can. And if you say to them, "Yeah, we can give you a bed for the night and $500," oh yeah, I'll come in. you know.
I organized concerts for over 10 years, and I come from a very remote area of Quebec, and we used to have artists from Norway, Finland, from everywhere. Because of that, we knew that they had to drive through there.
Yeah.
So we would spot them and be like, oh, what do you ask? Often they would be like, hotel room, something to eat, $200, perfect.
Yeah.
And we would get sometimes some really good American acts. And
oh, you can.
yeah.
You can, yeah. I mean, probably the best person I had in terms of fame was Sarah McLaughlin's guitarist, lead guitarist, who's on all of her hits. And they parted company, and so he went on the circuit. And he came back year after year to Streetfest and played. And of course, they all have their lovely stories that they tell you about, you know, where they've been, what they've done, where they're going next, all those things, which I think makes a great concert. So I really enjoyed that. So I think you've got a great opportunity, I mean, from what I've heard there. Yes?
Yeah. Do you know out of those 6,000 people that attended, how many were from Revelstoke and how many might have come to town for that?
Well,
a third.
Yeah,
a third local and 2/3 out of town. People come there and make it a weekend destination.
And where are they coming from?
All over, Lower Mainland, in Alberta.
People are driving to Revelstoke from the Lower Mainland.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, my son runs the escape rooms in Revelstoke. And the other night he had 2 guys turn up from Vancouver who'd driven up to play his escape room and then driving home again. People do this sort of thing, you know.
They combine it with, you know, they were there to mountain bike too, right? So there's a couple features or attractions you can package together. Yeah.
So, anything else? No? That's good. Thank you very much.
Gary is acting as the treasurer of the society that we started. So far we've done the 2 shows. The first one was the kids show, and then we got a grant for the Falls Festival of Fairs. And that portion went to Jim Burns to do the Blues Festival. So that was sort of a hybrid between corporately the gem and then the society portion. And the one thing is that Blues Weekend, there were people that came from Caslow, Trail, Castlegar, and the Vancouver Island drove up just to be part of that weekend. So it's a slow burn. It's going to be a slow burn. But that's kind of the idea of the whole idea of coming up with that concept, was to give reasons to bring more things here, and it'll benefit Kayla, it'll benefit Dan and Tiffany, whoever else is open at the time. If it's after 3. So we did put Gary to work to utilize his skills so that we could benefit from it here in the Boundary. So the next person is the former mayor of Revelstoke 2 times, former councillor, man of all. The best example of Mark McKee as a mayor was, he's the kind of guy that likes to back the truck up and get the dirt out quick by slamming on the brakes. All right, Mark, you're up.
I only did that once. And just for the record, to start off, Sean phoned me and said, would you come down and talk to us community development and things like that. I said, oh, Sean, I'm really busy. It's just, I might move back to Revelstoke if you don't come down. Okay, here I am. So, okay, we're good now? We're good. All right. I always get introduced as the former mayor and former politician, but I never introduce myself that way because I tell people I'm a retailer. That's my background. I ran menswear, ladies' wear for 33 years, and I opened up a cappuccino bar, and I started a TELUS mobility dealership. But so over the years, I've sold all the businesses off and kept the buildings, and my wife and I now, we have a few commercial buildings in Revelstoke. We have about 25 commercial tenants, and that's what I do, is look after commercial tenants. And you know, I rode my motorcycle down because I like doing stuff like that, and you know, so I could be at home for a couple of weeks and nothing will happen, but as soon as I get on the road, something will happen. So far, I have 1 toilet I got to fix, and I have 2 air conditioners that aren't working. So that's what I'm doing tomorrow afternoon when I get home. So, but you know, I moved to Revelstoke when I was 21 because I wanted to get out of Vancouver, Victoria, because I wanted to open my own business. And so I went to Revelstoke and managed a clothing store. We thought, oh, we'll go for 1 or 2 years, and ended up buying it and expanding it and doing some more. And so, you know, I'm also, I have kids, I have grandkids, I have a dog, I have a boat, 2 boats, motorcycle, RV. You know, we like to do a lot of things, and we're busy all the time, and we have lots of fun, and we have a great life. But when you get into a small town, when you're young and you're concerned about the town and the future of the town, well, you get involved with everything. And you know, I'm no different. I was director of the chamber and president of the chamber and economic development, and then it was, you know, Mark, you should get on council. You know, go. You know, so I did 9 years as a councillor. Quit. Didn't like the way things were going. Came back as mayor. Was 2 terms as mayor. Didn't run again. Took 6 years off. Didn't like the way things were running. Went back again as mayor. So I'm kind of 19 years off and on and doing other things. When I was younger, you know, I see a lot of Sean and Mia. You know, he's a little bit of a nut. And you know, why would they let a nut become mayor? I have no idea. But I was the goofy, crazy guy that come up with all the ideas. We got to do this and we got to do that. So when people come to me and say we should do this, I go, yeah, let's do it. So you know, I started a ball tournament in '88 that ended up being the 2nd largest ball tournament in BC, Kokanee Glacier Challenge. My wife and I and some friends and the other volunteers, we ran it for 25 years, handed it to somebody else, and it did its day not that long ago, a few years back, ran for 33 years. So that's pretty good. But you have to look at how the town evolved over that time to understand why things change, and they never stay the same. And we were, you know, is there anybody from the newspaper here? I want to be careful what I say, but Revelstoke was not in a good place for a long time, and that's why, as a business guy and a property owner and a father, you spend time trying to help the community, do things, build things up, make it a place that people want to come to, and quite frankly, we were bloody successful. But where did we start? And we'd have meetings and coffee, and we'd go for beer, and we'd talk, and it was always about what can we do to save the town and have it grow. And you know, we were the typical small town BC where we relied on forestry, and we had the railway, and you know, we had the Trans-Canada Highway, which we never took advantage of in those days. And I always remember somebody saying there's 3.5 million people drive by Revelstoke every year. And I go, God, how do I get $1 from every one of them? How do I do that? And that was my goal, is to get $1 from everybody that drove through town. Of course, that was just unrealistic because you just can't do it. But that was a market, and so we decided that, and I think that this was the catalyst for the future success of Revelstoke, is that we decided that downtown revitalization was what we should do. We got to make ourselves look good, make people want to come to our town, be a part of it. And of course, when I moved there, it was late November '77, and Gary talked a little bit about it. But I moved on the 21st of November. I moved to Revelstoke. On the 22nd of November, it started snowing, and it never bloody well stopped until March, and I couldn't believe it, that what the heck am I doing here? And it was unbelievable, the amount of snow that we got, and I was completely unprepared. And you can see I kind of go all over the place. So, you know, you guys say, every now and then say, Mark, focus, focus. That's okay, you can do that. But we started the Revite, and a few things that happened is that, you know, and there was people that were actively going up and down the street trying to stop the city council from doing it. They didn't go to referendum, they just went and they did it because we had a history in the community of big projects, and it was building of the highway, it was the railway, it was forestry, it was dams, it was mines, it was CP Rail doing an expansion and building a tunnel. So when I moved there was 12,000, I think our population was 12,000, but 6,000 lived at the man camp at the dam a few miles out of town, and then they would come into town and it was just like a giant party every Friday and Saturday night, and our credit union had to bring an armored truck into the town every week full of cash, because these guys would come with their paychecks and they would cash their paychecks and then go crazy. That's what the town was like. Well, when that ended, it was like the whole town had a giant hangover. But a hangover that lasted quite a few years, and at one point businesses were closing. Our kids, when they were going through the school system, couldn't wait to leave town and never come back. When you owned a house, every month it was worth less money. At one point in the mid-80s, 86, 87, 88, 30% of all houses in our community were for sale and not selling. And people that wanted to move out of town couldn't, because their house was worth so little money, they couldn't buy a house anywhere else with the money that they had from selling their house if they could sell. So, you know, it was really dire straits, and a lot of people knew it, a lot of people didn't know it. And when I moved in the late 70s, first thing I heard was, there's a ski hill coming to town. I went, oh, right on, ski hill coming to town, 1977. And so after getting involved and I get on council, I went on council because it was 1990, ski hill's coming to town, I'm gonna be a part of that. Well, 9 years as a councilor, there was no ski hill, and took 6 years off or whatever it was, came back as mayor. And I was the councilor that was in charge of getting the ski hill sold and developed, and I met these people from all over the world, and we just, it's, the highway's no good, the train doesn't take people on it anymore, there's no airport, there's, it goes on and on and on. And, but in the meantime, we had done this revitalization, and we were seeing the benefits of it, and the attitude and the people, the biggest employer besides the railroad was the forest industry, and the forest industry had shut down. Interest rates were high. We ended up, and that's when we did the revite, but we did a few other things back then, and I'm trying to get the order straight because I know I'm kind of all over the place. I'm confusing everybody, and I apologize for that. But we ended up finishing revite. The community saw what the effects were, and it was amazing the way that people reacted. We saw people taking pride in their community. We saw people fixing up their houses. These are the houses that were worth less money every month, but they saw what we were doing with their building, and our building, our first one that we bought, we were one of the first ones to jump on board, and we had no money, but we could see that it was important to the community, and so we bit the bullet, and people started fixing up their houses, people started opening up more businesses, things started turning around, the forest industry came back, people were in talking about ski hill development. And I don't think that a lot of the things that we accomplished would have happened without doing the revite in the first place. It was the cornerstone of the town. It created this can-do attitude that changed a lot of things. And what I would, yes.
I was going to ask the question. How did you bring on side those store owners that were too lazy to revitalize their storefront or even have anything there? It sounds like you just built around them, and then build it and they shall come. They'll jump on board.
That's not far off of what we did. What we did was we picked key buildings because of the way that they looked, because of the location that they were. And I think our building was number 4. The Roxy Theater was number 1 because it's a spectacular looking building. And so and it was basically, we'll do this street corner, we'll do that street corner. And so we focused on those, and being on the committee, that was one of the reasons why I was one of the first ones. And I had to go around door to door. All the retailers were all my friends, and some of them were pissed off. Some of them were on board. Some of them, you know, retailers are like herding cats. And, you know, God love them, I'm a retailer, and I understand exactly, but you cannot get this many retailers into a room and have them agree on anything. And that's okay. That's because that's the type of animal that they are. But when they see their competition or their neighbor and, oh cow, they got a really nice looking building. And it wasn't just retailers, because it was building owners that were charging rent to the tenants for the building. So they fix up their building, it's a nicer building, it could demand a higher rent.
Was there any, you say you fixed up, so it was like the municipality putting forward some funds towards this? Are there grants available? What was kind of, where was the money?
Well, there was a program in the provincial government. It was called the acronym was HARP, and it was Heritage something Revite program, and it was they put this pile of money in, and what they did was they would loan it out to the communities, and the community paid it back interest-free or very low interest, and then that money was then taken to another community. It was an unbelievable program, and you know, NDP got rid of it, so it was gone. But there was other parts to that program that were really made ours successful. And the council of the day, I'll just finish this and I'll grab you in just a sec. The council of the day went by council initiative, not by referendum. So we had some money in a special reserve account that nobody knew what it was for. It was electrical utility reserve fund, because 50 years ago they sold a city-owned dam to BC Hydro, and that money just sat there. We took some of that money. The city did all the streetscaping, upgrading the. I think you guys are talking about doing something here similar, where you're upgrading infrastructure underneath the road. We did that. We fixed up. We did all the streetscaping. There was a 2-part grant for people to fix up their building. The province stepped in part of it, but we also had I think as a building owner, I think I had a 15% increase in my property taxes, as well as fixing up my building, you know, less the grants, of course. So it was a robbing Peter and paying Paul and trying to pile things together, but it was rip up the whole town, fix up the buildings, fix up the street gate. And then, of course, just as we're doing it, CUPE, the city union, went on strike. Right in the middle of the whole thing. Yes, dear?
Yeah, so you answered quite a few of my questions, but so how many block radius are we talking about here in the very beginning? And then secondly, did you adjudicate at the council level those grants? Like how did you manage that process? And it wasn't taxation dollars with the exception of the special reserve fund that you had, correct?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah.
And of course, we're on it. I'm not sure what the multiplier is here, but in Revelstoke, it's for every dollar that you collect in residential, you collect $4 in commercial. Yeah. So that's where we are. I know we're a little bit high, but so the residents paid some. I paid as a resident, and I also paid as a building owner, and that's how I got the 15% increase. The size of the project, area-wise, I think your downtown core, I think, is bigger than ours. But our specified area went out, and so we defined what it was, and it was just commercial. I would say it was 3 blocks by 8 blocks. Something like that. Did I answer all your questions?
Yeah, and just in relation to the grants, did council city staff adjudicate that grant process?
Well, the thing is that the grants were set up for certain things, and it came down to if you have an awning or canopy is like this, an awning is like that. If you have a canopy, and we wanted to get the canopies down to have an awning because it was more heritage, there was a grant by how many lineal feet that you took down and changed out. The province, through the heart, and it was Bob Inwood. That was the first time I met Bob Inwood out of Winlaw, Main Street Consulting. He did a lot of the design work, but he worked for the provincial government, and they had a formula on how grants could be administered to fixing up the outside of buildings, and he was the guy. And Bob and I are still great friends, and we just finished a building, and I got occupancy on 2 days ago, and Bob did the outside design work for me. The guy is a genius. And but anyways, yes.
Yeah, Grand Forks did a downtown revitalization in 1985, and I was working for the city at that time, and it was repaid by the specified area, that grant, and I agree, it's time to do it again.
Yeah.
Until that's fun.
You know what? The bones of the town is awesome. You guys are already miles ahead of where we were when we started our revite. I love the look. I love a lot of the things that you got. You got wide streets and wide sidewalks. You got a lot of advantages over what we didn't have. Did you have another question? No, good. So the thing. Oh no, I can't wait. Okay, so with the success of the revite and things are slowly turning around, what it did for the community was, and I've said this 100 times, is that any good thing that's happened in Revelstoke is there because a bunch of volunteers got together and said, we're going to make this thing happen, we're going to do this. And whether it's our indoor aquatic center, the Railway Museum, the downtown revite, basically we had volunteers that took over and ran the ski hill. Gary talked about the Visual Arts Center, which was we were forced to build a new police station, and the visual arts people came to us and said, we want that police station, and we can only pay $1 a year. Well, that seemed like a pretty darn good deal to me. So that's what happened there, and glad to be able to participate in it. Other things that we've done in committees is what you talked about, the skate park, same thing. A bunch of people got together, they come to City Hall and they say, okay, here's where we are, and they've been doing it for 5 years or longer, and we sat down and we said, okay, let's push these guys over the top. How do we get $150,000? Well, you get on the phone, you make a few phone calls, and the next thing you know, you got the money, you scrape here, you rob here, you pay Paul, you get the money, you do it. When I ran the last time, we had a little pool that Interior Health shut down, and I looked at it and I said, wouldn't this be nice, as part of my campaign, wouldn't this be nice if this was a splash park? And we worked on it. We did an extra year after I retired the second time from being mayor, but Sean was on that committee. My wife was spearheading it, and I was the one that was making all the nasty phone calls trying to get the money for it. I can't remember what it was, $650,000, $650. But again, it's a group of volunteers that got together. They come to the city and say, here's what we've done. How do you, as a municipal government, or a provincial government, or a federal government, how do you say no when the community gets together and saying, this is what we want? And that's what we did, and it works for anybody, any community, because if you can show that you've got community support, if you show that you've got all of the questions answered before you go to the political masters, you can't go to somebody and say, well, we need this, and then turn around and walk away. It doesn't work like that. It works from the ground up, because you build the support, you figure out all the problems, you figure out how everything's going to work, you get all your costing, you do some fundraising, but it's building the bigger support and getting everybody behind you. And we went from a town that was almost bankrupt to a town now that the main reason why we stopped our ball tournament is because August long weekend, nothing ever happened in our town. And now you can't get a room, you can't get into a restaurant, you can't go to a campground. Why do we want an event that's bringing another 2,500, 3,000 people to the town when the town is full? That's the difference. Now, if I could run a ball tournament in October and bring 3,000 people in town, I'd have all kinds of support, but it doesn't work like that. But you look at what's happening now, and you know, Ingrid's part of it and Gary's part of it, but people are coming for the arts, they're coming for the outdoor experience, like mountain biking. You know, the town is sick with mountain bikers. And you know, I don't even have to tell you about the ski hill because, you know, now my wife and I were, well, let's go out for dinner. We won't go out for dinner in the wintertime. You know, we're not used to having to make a reservation. But that's the way that we've changed. And we've got more restaurants than you can shake a stick at. And it's just, everything is completely different now. And our biggest problem is, instead of the house prices getting lower and lower every year, it's we don't have enough housing. We don't have enough employees. Affordable housing is a big deal, and I've been off and on the Affordable Housing Society for years, and I think there's some great things that are coming that are going to make some big dents in it. But we've also got a business community that understands if I'm going to run a business, I better figure out how my employees are going to live, and you're seeing businesses building or buying accommodation for their employees because they can't get them. So when there's a problem, you figure out a solution. And that's, I guess, the real takeaway here is, what do you want? What's important to the community? What's your vision for the future of the town, and how are you going to get there? Is there people thinking like you? You get together and you figure it out. And it's when you do the first thing, like Revite or whatever it is, you start realizing we can do whatever we want. And that's really what happened to our community, is that they figured out that we can do these things, and that's how a lot of the great facilities that we have, that's how they came about, because a bunch of volunteers got together and said, you know what, we're going to do it. And they did. And how do I, as the mayor, how do I say no when I've got a group that's already figured everything out, got all the answers, and all I got to do is beat up other levels of government to try to get some funding? Good things to do. It's a good problem to have. Anyway, I probably have about 500 other things, but I think I'm getting there. And Richard?
Yeah, I was wondering, do you think that in Revelstoke there was a predisposition or some pre-existing condition for arts to bloom, such as maybe a more adventurous mindset for people? Was it pre-existing? Was there already an appetite for like innovative arts or things that go?
Well, I think that that what happens is that when people are coming to enjoy a community, enjoy nature, and get out and they're active and they're spending time with their family, those kind of people appreciate all that the arts have to offer, and they'll participate because they're just enjoying another aspect of living. And I think that it's a natural progression for a community that when you are a nice looking, desirable place that people want to be, then there's a market for artists to be doing their art and selling. So I think it's just a natural progression, I think, of a community evolving.
Yeah, just a couple of things. So as who did the majority of the promotion to bring people into Revelstoke? Was it the council? Was it the Arts Council? Was it their Chamber of Commerce? Or was it all working together to get the word out?
Well, no, later on I would think there's some working together, but at the very start it was council pays a fee for service to the Chamber of Commerce. We have a economic development officer that we fund between the city and the regional district, but we pay a fee for marketing to the chamber, and I think that that's still ongoing. But now, because of the MRDT and there's also the RAW, which is the Revelstoke Accommodation Association, there is more pots of money to be doing all these things. And what you want is you want a conglomerate so that you're not overlapping and you have a control over the brand and where it's all going instead of a mishmash all over the place. And that's why, as far as the city's going, you know, stay out of it because, you know, we're politicians. We're not that good at it. It's get the people that are good at doing it and give them the money.
I would add that one of the unique things about Revelstoke is the Chamber of Commerce, Community Futures, Tourism Revelstoke, and Community Economic Development Function are all co-located, and it's not in City Hall. And that's what makes it, I think, really effective. You still have access to the politicians and senior leadership, but you are also leveraging the resources of your business service partners.
And that was done by design right at the very start. Right from the very start, we put all of those together so that they would work collaboratively. And it was one-stop shopping for somebody that, I need all this information to open up a business in town. Go there, and then they say, well, you want to go to this office and this office, and they could run the gauntlet of everybody that they need to talk to in one space. And over the years, different councils and different staff have all tried to be breaking that up and separating it all, but it works good together. And I don't know if anybody, other communities do that. I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, Community Futures here, so we do have the chamber co-located in our office. Yeah, we'd absolutely love to have any of the other players there too.
And just on a different note, in Revelstoke, do you have an issue with people with addictions and homelessness, and what impact is that having on your community, business and others?
Well, I travel around a lot, and I think that there's a lot. We have a problem. You know, just like everybody has a problem. Our climate doesn't make it as visible as a lot of other places do. Where, you know, I know that they've got a little camp set up on the side of the highway right now, but it's not out in the open as much. And you know, when I was chair of the Affordable Housing Society, we were asked about doing, you know, a special place for these. But unless the government is going to step in and offer services to these people, you're just creating a bigger problem. They have to have addiction services and mental health and whatever else that they need. And if you can't get somebody to provide those services, you're asking for a lot of trouble.
So do you have a lot of those types of people downtown affecting businesses though?
No.
Directly? Okay.
I would not say so. I don't know if anybody disagrees with me, but
probably not. But you know, one of the new things with Revelstoke is they actually invested early in having a social development coordinator paid for by the city, and that person was able to go leverage grants that end up raising many times more the cost of their salary to provide all those different services and bring them together. And so we do have that homeless problem. We have emergency shelter, but it's spread out into different motels around town, and the services go to them.
When we knew that the ski hill was coming, that was one of the conditions that we put in to ourselves is hiring a social development coordinator, because we knew that the ski hill would be bringing more social problems, and just because there's more people and it's a giant party sometimes in some areas, but I don't know if the resort has actually created these things or if it's a natural progression of the way towns are.
I was interested in your comment that Revelstoke was bankrupt, you know, and you've grown out of that through a lot of the changes that you've made. What was the population of Revelstoke kind of before this change happened, and has that brought new people in who have that interest and desire to see, these arts, the arts and those other activities, because, Sean put on phenomenal Blues Fest this past weekend, and, the quality of the acts that were here, this place should have been like filled and spilling out onto the street. But you talk to some of the older people who are from the community. There's a lot of kind of apathy, yeah. and I think you kind of reflected that in your comments earlier. Well, that there was that attitude in Revelstoke.
Well, sure there was. Yeah, because and it's just like when I made the comment about now we can go out for dinner because you don't need a reservation. Well, for years it was, it's Revelstoke, we're putting on this big event and spending thousands and thousands of dollars. We got hardly any ticket sales. They're going to come. And then of course, half an hour they're flooding in the door, and it's a successful event. And they don't buy tickets because they don't have to, because they know that they can get in, or they just at the last minute say no, we're not. Now we have an online sales thing, and it's called the Stoke List, and every time there's now a community event going on that got tickets 3 days before, I need 2 tickets, I need 6 tickets, who's got them? Events are all sold out now, where before they weren't. Before the Skido came in, we were like a destination sledder town, and we still are, but the sleds would just show up on Friday night, and they would party all weekend, and then all of a sudden they showed up on Friday night and there was no hotel rooms and motels available, and well, what happened? Well, it's just like every other part of the world that you got to make a reservation before you go somewhere. And so it changes, and people's attitude changes, and I was hoping somebody wouldn't actually pick up on that comment about bankrupt, but I was saying we were going in that direction, and we as community leaders and business people, we could see what was going on, and we better do something about it. We better start looking at reinventing ourselves. And so we talked about, well, we're going to do this, this, and this is what's going to happen. And then, so then 15 years later, we're all sitting around having a beer and go, holy Christ, it did happen. And like we're as shocked at the success of how it turned out, probably more than anybody else, because we were at the table trying to figure out what to do. But
is that roughly the time frame it took, and what happened to Revelstoke, like population-wise?
Well, it's because you got to remember is that there's a whole other economies of Revelstoke, and the resort development and all that, and is just another part of our economic pie. We've always had forestry, but forestry, it's a cyclical industry, and it goes up and down and sideways, but it was the cornerstone of the community, and Revelstoke is there because of the railroad. But the railroad has always threatened, now we're going to move the divisional point, which is going to take 300 jobs or whatever. And it's slowly getting smaller as they take more people off running the train, and they took the shops out, and they're doing less repairs on bridges and things like that. So it's slowly getting smaller, but it's still part of our economy. So it's this one part of it may be getting smaller, but other parts are getting bigger, and it's always a moving target. But having a more diversified economy is the best scenario. Now, our tourism portion of our economy is getting bigger and bigger, but the next offshoot of that is, and Ingrid briefly talked about it, is that we're having people that are deciding that this is the place that we want to be. It's got all of these amenities that we want. It's got the natural environment right in the doorstep, whether it's the ski hill or mountain biking or backcountry skiing, backcountry hiking, fishing, camping. So people are relocating for lifestyle. All these communities in BC that are having trouble with doctors, we have doctors that live in Revelstoke that commute to work, and they go to Salmon Arm, and they go to other places. And I had a meeting with doctors when I was mayor, and I said, oh God, all these problems with communities having doctors, I wish I could sell doctors. And they didn't think that was very funny, but but that's where we have specialists that are working as GPs because they want to be in that Revelstoke lifestyle. So it just shows how important it is to build the brand and work towards the type of community that you want to be, because you know, you don't know who is going to be coming here, and people may come just because they're active retirees or whatever it is, but they become part of your community, they become volunteers, and that's what you want. We have, of course, we have what we call, it's called Black Window Homes, where people buy a house, and then, you know, it's a $2 million house, and they come for 6 weeks of the year to ski, and, you know, and the house sits empty for the rest of the time. Or they buy a townhouse or a condo, and then they put it into a rental pool, and they come and visit once in a while, and the short-term rental makes money and pays all the bills for it. So we have a lot of that, and so our population, the core population, is slowly growing. But you look at the TELUS Insights, and when I look at it, I go 15,000 people. Holy cow, that's, you know, it's a lot more people than you think. As a community, we have 7,500 taxpayers, but we're providing services for 15,000. And that's another issue that you really have to take into consideration, is that, so the core is paying that, and our business taxes are a big percentage of our budget, but it's a big part of our community, and you know, it's always a work in progress to try to balance everything out, but it's a better problem than one of everybody's leaving, and you know, and businesses are shutting down. But so we're this new building that we just built, my wife and I, we're actually going to move into the second floor. We built a big apartment up there, so we decided rather than sell our house, we're going to rent it out. And our daughter, who is now 38, her best friend, and all through school, wants to move back to Revelstoke with her husband and her family. So we're giving them our house to rent at a huge discount, because I think it's important for young families to be moving back to a community, and they're looking at buying a business, and they're going to raise their family just like what we did. And you know, it's a great thing to see that these kids that left, you think were never coming back, are now coming back to our community.
I don't know, question for you, Ingrid. Where's the city right now on like Airbnbs and bylaws around short-term rentals? I know like I don't feel like Groundworks is there yet, but I know they're
like 2.
Yeah, we could use more than 2. We could use more, but I'm just curious because I know there's the good and the bad. So where's
it's controversial?
Yeah,
sure. I mean, it's hard to get it. It's a bit of a moving target. I think the city tried to bring in legislation on a pilot basis. We have about 300 units. But that's 300 units outside the units that are allowed to be rented out on a short-term basis by used developers. So, you know, back in the day, a lot of the big developments like Mackenzie Village and something like that, they're all eligible to become short-term vacation rentals. And I want to rent a short-term vacation rental. I'm paying my mortgage. So you're trying to balance the needs of the consumer who wants that choice, with the homeowner who needs to pay the mortgage, with the accommodators and hoteliers who don't want the competition. And it's a very, very tricky balance on that. I don't know if there's an easy solution. I think the province stepping up to basically change the legislation recently so that these properties can't be rented out necessarily is probably where the decision should come from. The province should be setting the tone and stepping up.
I'm hearing numbers that we're somewhere around 500, which with like half of them being illegal. The city is starting to crack down on those ones, and they're actually starting to find people that are running illegal Airbnbs, and it's a big issue that a lot of communities are trying to deal with. And I don't know if anybody's got the right answer, but the Airbnbs I think are important to a resort community. And what we have to do as communities is we have to figure out how to work with them so that they fit in, they pay their fair share, and they become, because they're a business, so start paying like a business. My taxes are 4 times what my house is. Maybe yours should be too.
And then just to follow up on that, does the ski resort have workforce housing?
No, but it's finally being built. Their threshold for triggering workforce housing, they haven't come anywhere close to reaching that yet, but they are moving ahead of doing that, partly because they need to. They bought up every hostel and every Airbnb and large Airbnbs and even hotels in town, and they still can't house all the workers. And now the rest of the business communities.
when I was part of the master plan process with the resort and with the province, and what we had certain conditions as a community that we wanted, and one of them was employee housing. And we wanted, they were approved for 16,600 bed units, and if you don't know what a bed unit is, I'll tell you later on, but it's broken down into different categories. They had to provide 10%. We wanted 10% of the bed units as employee housing. And then when the master plan tells you what the resort is going to look like. The master development agreement between the province and the resort developer is just between them. It's got nothing to do with us. They signed the agreement. The province allowed them to have phase 1 where they didn't have to provide it, because at the time there was accommodations in the town. It was a mistake as far as I'm concerned, but that's what was done. And they're now coming to that threshold. They've got some employee housing buildings that are, I think they've been approved in the city, and I think they've started construction. Yeah, so I'm thinking a year and a half they'll have those available.
Yeah, just one thing about the Airbnbs. I don't know this from personal direct experience, but someone that I know had talked recently. Airbnb had come out with respect to another place that has Airbnb accommodation potential, and they said that Airbnb is actually cracking down on the providers because with all the bad publicity around Airbnb with the party locations and all that kind of stuff, where there actually has to be back to what it was originally intended as, like, I got a basement suite and rent it out, where there's actually residency there versus someone buying a condo and never being anywhere near it and just turning it into an Airbnb party house. So I think that maybe changed from.
One other comment I just thought of that we've just done recently is, and larger cities have negotiated this directly with Airbnbs.
Yeah.
For instance, cities like Toronto or Vancouver, you must have a business license to be an Airbnb. In Revelstoke now, you must have a business license to be an Airbnb. You rent from $50 to $500.
Yeah, that's a good step for sure.
So that just was passed, $500 now to run an Airbnb in Revelstoke, and that will help mitigate some of those impacts.
When I was mayor, I had several meetings with Airbnb and talked to them, and they had all the stats on every property in Revelstoke, and they have it on every community. The bottom line for them is that they want things done properly. They want good facilities. They want everything legal. They want to collect whatever taxes that the governments deem necessary. They're doing whatever they can to make their brand look good and do the right thing. And you know, people say Airbnb, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the people are on Airbnb. They could be on VRBO. They could be on whatever else. They could be just putting an ad on an online place and rent my place, you know, like, yeah. But you know, it's a catchphrase for short-term rental. It's not necessarily Airbnb, it's short-term rental. Yeah.
Yeah, being a traveler, being through many throughout the years of my life and seeing the transition of what it was to what it is today, you know, I'm very impressed. I think, like you say, seeing those 3 million vehicles come through on that highway every year and getting the ability to get people to stop and take a little notice of you guys, you know, you've done a great job with that. But it's a big piece for ourselves as well. At Highway 3, we do the same thing. We have the maintenance on traffic filter. And then we would get those people to stop and take a moment and then realize it's more to do than just get some gas and some food. That's where we need to take it to, is get this community recognized as a destination location.
Well, you know how you eat an elephant? You start with the first bite. Yeah.
I just want to add to that too. Grand Forks has an excellent opportunity because the highway goes right past downtown. Like, you're only a half a block off and you can actually see what's going on downtown. Revelstoke is way across town on the highway. So you actively have to turn in, do a roundabout and make your way in. So you have to purposely want to go into Revelstoke, or Grand Forks is just, okay, that looks cool, and you're right there.
Yeah, some guy once asked me at the Denny's, is this where people live? I said, yes, right here in the Denny's.
That's a good point, because you know, people complain about, locals can complain about, oh, well, you know, the traffic is tied up, it's rerouted by, you know, the plaza where the music is, but honestly, people drive by and they see that music, they find a place to park and walk back.
Yeah, if you get that far and you see it off the street,
that's a huge
you pull in. So once you see it.
But you know, there was a comment earlier about how some of the locals and they're complaining of it. You know, it's and you do nothing, you're going to get complaints. You do something, you're going to get complaints. And you know, like I'm not fat. I got skin that's about that thick, and because it doesn't bother me. It's you know, people are going to say something, and you just have to take it with a grain of salt because look at the end result and look at what's happening. And people that I never thought would support the changes in the town, they go on, you know, Mark, and you know, this is a retired guy from Highways. He's, you know, there's all these great restaurants in town. We get to go skiing, and we see all these people, and they're walking down the street. They're talking different languages, and I go, wow, you know, and I like all that stuff too. But everybody has a different reaction to all the things all the changes, and it's a hell of a lot better now than it was 20 years ago.
And I think the biggest thing you can do is make your town a place that your kids want to come back to. And that'll convince any naysayer if they have the families to come back.
Why they're not coming back looking for money?
Yeah.
Good question.
I was just going to make a comment. I traveled to Europe quite a bit. My husband's from there, from Scotland. And what people want is they want to go to places like Europe because they're quaint towns, they're beautiful, they've got cafes to sit outside the sidewalk, they've got nice restaurants, you know, events going on, things like that. Walkways along waterways, you know, deck systems and things like that, or plazas or promenades. That's what people want. So.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just I know you've been, you know, highly active member of your community for all these years, so you've seen that transition of volunteers and creating a lot of the stuff done by grassroots operations. But do you find you get volunteer burnout, and then you'll find that you're also creating community tribes? You get more volunteers start to move in and help out because they want to see the change.
Yeah, and you know, again, it's always a work in progress. You know, years ago, we used to have volunteer appreciation, and we would take the community center and we'd have a big dinner, and the city would pay for it. We'd invite every volunteer from every organization would come, and the place would be full, and they would have you know, spaghetti night or whatever it was, and then there would be awards giving out for certain volunteers, and just it's to appreciate what the things that they do. And like I said, and you know, when I ran the ball tournament, the reason why I was successful because I looked after the volunteers. I wined them and dined them and did everything I could because they were, every year for 25 years, they gave up their long weekend to come and work for free for the community. Nobody got paid. I didn't get paid. I organized it all year round. But, you know, the volunteers, so you have, and we have to keep turning down volunteers because they want to be part of something that's successful. And, you know, one of the things I want to mention is that we just did, for the last 2 years, we did this Illuminate Revelstoke Society, and Sean was part of that, where we're dressing up the trees downtown and we're lighting them all up, and you guys are going to get some lights coming up. You watch when those lights turn on, the reaction that people are going to have. I have never seen a bigger reaction from a community as when we turned our lights on in our town, and dollar for dollar, that probably has had a bigger impact on anything that we've done in town. So you watch what'll happen, and what it's going to do is it's going to signal to the volunteers in this town, okay, it's time for us to get together and do something. Look at, because there's nothing better than making people feel good and making them smile and make them want to come down and look at it. They'll bring the kids down, and next thing you know, there'll be the gym theater be selling ice cream out of the front because that's what people want at night. That's what's happened with our music in the plaza. Is that the Chinese restaurant put an ice cream bar out in the front waiting area to sell ice cream to the people that are listening to the music. You can't think of all the things that are going to happen because you have a diverse community, and all these people are saying, well, I like this idea, and it doesn't matter what it is if it gets traction and people like it and they support it, there's no reason why you can't make it happen.
What you're mentioning there about the lighting, as particularly in the darker parts of the year, is the downtown area of Revelstoke, besides you know, the typical restaurant operations or the cinema that is open later? Is there a lot of retail that's open, say, past 5 or 6 o'clock?
Well, you know, like you said, retailers are like herding cats. If a business person sees an opportunity to make money, they're going to do it. And what they need to do is they need to see that there is an opportunity, and it's the chicken and egg, who's going first. But once you start and you continue to do it, it's just like you guys, I heard someone closing off for Farmers Market Street Fest and it wasn't successful. You have to make a commitment for something like that for a period of time, and then where everybody will figure out, just like trying to fill this place for every event. If you're consistent and you keep bringing something, it's pretty soon people are looking forward to it and they're lining up and buying tickets. It's knowing nobody's going to want to go downtown to shop in the evening when 90% of the stores are closed. So, but if there's 10 stores or 15 stores open, well, let's go downtown, have a walk around, we'll get an ice cream at the theater, we'll listen to some music, and people see that. And the people that are traveling through, let's go for a walk downtown. It's all lit up, it looks nice. This is what happens. No one thing is going to change the community. It's doing a whole bunch of little things at the same time, and eventually it's going to click, and then you're going to look at each other going, huh, that was easy. But you got to take that first bite of the elephant. Anyways, I want to thank Sean for bringing us out here, and for you people to take time out of your day to come and listen to us. I think that we'll probably just be right here. If people got to go, great. If people want to come up and ask questions, we're always available. And I saw somebody walking around here with a shirt that said beer on it, and that's always a good thing too.
So on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, I just want to thank everyone for coming out today. And I heard a few times about getting involved and volunteer, and it's nice. I see a lot of new faces here that aren't typically at some of our events. So thank you to those new people for coming out. And if you want to get involved, talk to Sean or myself from the Chamber, from the Arts Council, and there's lots of organizations in town where people can step up. And yeah, thank you so much. I found it really interesting. I like the economic development side of things. I hope everyone really enjoyed it. And as Mark said, they're going to be around for a bit. So yeah.